time to go lights out with the one and only Leigh Diffey. Leigh, it is so great to see you, mate. It's been way too long. Just for a little history lesson for people, you were the first ever guest on Lights Out. And since then, a lot has happened. But what have you been up to? I know you're doing some world traveling.
Yeah, always busy, Johnny. And thank you for asking me back on the show again, too. And congrats on all the episodes that you've had between then and now. NBC Sports always keeps me busy. I've been doing IMSA sports cars, Supercross, Monster Energy Supercross. I've been doing track and field, all in the lead up to NBC's portion of the NASCAR Cup Series starting in Iowa on the first weekend of August. So even though I haven't been on any NASCAR coverage since the championship finale last year, there'll be plenty coming up, and I've still been super busy.
What do you think, Leigh, so far about what's gone on this season? I know a lot of people have been really excited about the prime coverage. We've had more last lap passes, it seems like, a lot of rear ends and seats, and a lot of eyes on the TV.
I think it's great. Look, I think in addition to everything that you just described, I think there's so many storylines to pique our interests, whether you may be a first-time viewer or a lifetime fan. I mean, Kyle Larson has shown, even with his 3 wins this season, that he is human. He is fallible. He's not Superman. It hasn't all gone to plan. I think it's tremendous as far as for the more experienced drivers, in that category, that Denny is back. Great to see him have multiple wins after some frustration in the past. I'm really intrigued by the movement, the off-season movement. That saying of like how it started and how it's going.
Yeah.
I like to say what changed and what's the latest. And the latest example of that is Chase Briscoe. So he got the ride of his life at JGR, taking over the 19 from Martin Truex Jr. With crew chief James Small, and so that was a major change of scenery, change of engine manufacturer. Lots to get used to. But how it's going is he's in the playoffs, and I know he was last year as well, but he's there a lot earlier, and he's way up the order in comparison to where he was last year. And there's lots of other stories like that.
So, Leigh, we're in a business here where people, the eyes are on us, and I think we all worry about our performance and want to do a good job. But let me read a couple things really quick that people wrote after you took over the NBC play-by-play role, which is a really big role. First of all, Denny Hamlin said, Leigh Diffey was fantastic. Is there any way we could get him to do all 36 races? And Jeff Burton said, after his son Harrison won Daytona, Jeff Burton said, it was a very special night, but it was made more special by the victory call that Leigh Diffey made. That's got to warm your heart, mate, when you look back at that, when guys that pay attention, that know what's going on in this thing, are saying stuff like that about you.
Yeah, that's super kind. That's especially from one of my teammates as well. Because we like to give each other plenty of grief, off the air, and have a good laugh and have fun. But that, to Jeff's point, that was really special for me. Just I felt incredibly privileged to have been able to call that, and to be sitting alongside, have Jeff in between myself and Stevie, and for Denny to say that, super kind. And I tried. Like whatever I'm working on, I tried really hard. I did my homework. I was really excited about the opportunity. I put a lot of pressure on myself to perform as best that I could, knowing full well that I'm coming into an arena that I hadn't spent a lot of time in. It's not like I hadn't done NASCAR before, but it had been a long time since I had, and I was not going to I'd never done this many races in succession as far as Cup Series competition. So I put a lot of pressure on myself to do a good job, and I'm going to do that again this year. I want to do even better. Don't just sit around and say I'm going to do the same, because I don't want to do the same. I want to do even better. And I still have a laundry list of people that I have yet to meet. What race weekends are like. It's busy. We kind of get pulled in a few different directions, and you don't always get as much time in the garage area as you would like. I can't speak more highly for the folks in the garage area. They were so welcoming to me, very, very open. And I have to say that kind of took me a little bit by surprise, because I've been in so many different paddocks and garage areas in America and around the world, and different different categories of motorsport are more or sometimes less welcoming. But I have to say the Cup Garage was incredibly welcoming and really open. I think I was fortunate that a lot of the crew chiefs and some of the engineers, knew me from my other passages of work, whether that be F1 or IndyCar or Supercross or whatever it may have been. So that kind of helped the conversation start a little bit easier. And I can't speak enough for my teammates either. Steve Letarte, Jeff Burt, and Marty Snyder, everybody involved who just said, come on, Diff, we'll go and introduce you to John Roberts or whoever it may have been. And they were super, super helpful. So for my landing pad that was last year, I'm really excited to launch off that again this August.
What's the biggest difference for you, Diff? You've done so many, like you mentioned, you've done so many different disciplines of racing, and they are so different. Formula One, yes, the idea is to go fast, and these are superstars and are heroes behind the wheel. But was that the biggest difference? Was the open arms in the garage area and on the paddock, or was there a real difference, Leigh, when it comes to calling these races?
Yeah, for sure. There's a difference in calling the races. Just the cadence of the race is different. The size of the field is different. Now, I've called big fields before at the Rolex 24 at Daytona, or even just this past weekend at Watkins Glen for the 6 hours, the classic endurance sports car race. We had 55 cars, not 40 cars, or sometimes we have 37 in Cup or what it might be. So there's lots of differences. The length of the race. Just the way the race plays out, strategy a little bit different. We're incredibly lucky to have, I'm incredibly lucky to have to sit beside Jeff and Steve and how they read the race from both a driver perspective and crew chief perspective. So there's lots of areas that are different. To say call a MotoGP race or to call a Supercross race is different to calling a 1,500 meter track and field event. There's crossovers, but they're all unique in a certain way. And so to learn to have 12 consecutive weeks, like I did at the end of last year, to learn that cadence of a Cup race, whether it be on a 1.5 mile oval or a super speedway or a road course, just to learn, get familiar with the cadence of a Cup race again was really neat.
So, Diff, fortunately, it did not hurt your career at all working next to me back in the old Speed Channel days. But I still remember the day, and I always will, that they said, hey, you're doing Speed Report this weekend with Leigh Diffey. And I said, oh, great. I know he's a pro. I know he's one of the best in the business. Now I get to do a show with him. But I think, Leigh, back in those days of Speed Channel, we're lucky to be a part of something. And it certainly made me grow a lot. Nobody at Speed really cared who got what credit for what. Everybody dove in, and it was one for all and all for one. I miss those days. I miss working with you, but I think, looking back on those days, they were really pretty cool.
Well, think about when we got to work together on, well, there were multiple names, weren't they? It was Speed News, Speed Report, there were different names, but just think about the different people who did that. You and me, or you and Adam Alexander, me and Adam, Ralph Shaheen, Bob Varsha, Dave Despain. I'm forgetting a ton of people, but so many. Chris Devoda, so many people used to host that show, and we all got to intermix. And quite often, I wasn't working on NASCAR when you were working on NASCAR, and the only time we'd get to chat and hang out would be either, at our respective homes in Cornelius, North Carolina, or in the studio. So I think just the way that Speed was, it was like the honeypot, and it brought all of us, it brought all of us together at the honeypot. And, sadly, in a way, there's nothing like that anymore. There just isn't that one focal point on the sport, because all the different networks have their different properties, and whereas Speed was somewhat of a nucleus, and I think for all of us who got to walk those hallways for however many years, I think we consider ourselves extremely fortunate.
Oh, there's no question about that. And also, Diffey, because the statute of limitations might not be up, we won't get too much into what went on at the homes in Cornelius, North Carolina. We'll skip that for now. But Leigh, when we did part ways and you went off to do different things, you did some of the coolest things. I loved watching you do the Olympics in really interesting places, and the stories that you told me about what you encountered covering those different events and just how exciting they were. Starting with the Olympics, Diff, I've heard people that have been around them. I unfortunately have never been around Olympics, but there's just such an interesting aura about that event, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, it's if you imagine, like on Daytona 500 race day or Indy 500 race day, and when you're entering the facility, when you're entering the track, and you just get so hyped because there's going to be something big happen that day. You don't know what it is that's going to happen, but it's going to be significant. And at the Olympics, well, certainly if I go back to the most recent one, which was Paris last summer, calling track and field, Stade de France, we had 70,000, just under 70,000 people in there morning and night every single day. And we would walk from our hotel to the venue, and just that air of anticipation, but also excitement, and everybody was in a good mood. The weather was fantastic, and it just gets you super hyped up, super jacked, because you know that it's going to be really special. And then just down the road beneath the Eiffel Tower is the beach volleyball, and there was just so many amazing venues and things like that. But that it's a big deal, and it happens only once every 4 years, whether that be winter or summer. And I feel super lucky to have done 6 now.
Wow.
I'd like to do a few more, and it's very different to motorsport in what I call is actually every time I've done the Olympics, it's always been racing based, whether that be bobsled, skeleton, or luge, or rowing, or track and field. It's all racing based. And so I do find there are some crossovers with motorsport, and motorsport has made me a better track and field commentator, and doing track and field there's been some crossover back to motorsport, and I've really enjoyed that. I've really enjoyed the blend. So I've just come off, as I mentioned, IMSA, and then the weekend after next, I'm back doing track and field again. So I like bouncing back and forth, because after doing it for so many years now, the similarities are more obvious, and I think the crossover works, and it's a lot of fun, Johnny.
Diff, I think whatever job you have, I think people need to know that there's a work ethic involved. You can want to be a certain thing, but if you're going to be in a certain role, you're going to have to do the homework. You're going to have to put in the work to be successful at it. Yeah, anybody can say, hey, I'm doing a TV show, but if you're going to be successful at it, you definitely have to do the legwork. And when you go into something, Diff, that you're not particularly versed in, what kind of approach do you take in terms of doing your homework? Because I think that's what a lot of people said in the industry. And again, I'm going to be biased because we're friends, but people, Diff, that that were not around you, said that it was so evident that you were prepared to take on the NASCAR role, but that just doesn't happen accidentally.
Yeah. It's just like, as I tell my boys, it's just homework, right? You got to, like, they're still in school. They're in high school, and I see times when they're under stress, when they've got exams coming up, and periods of assessment. And so I'd say to them, listen, that's me almost every weekend. I have to watch tape. I have to do my reading. I have to take notes. I've got to absorb it all. And my examination is in front of the nation every weekend, pretty much. And so it's just lots of the same. When they were little, they would say, "Dad, why are you in the office again?" And I said, "Well, I got to do my homework." And I do more, I think, probably now and these years as a broadcaster than I ever did when I was at university. So
Yeah.
I love it like you do, and you got to have that passion and enthusiasm. I always like to say that enthusiasm always wins out. So if it was covering something that I really didn't enjoy, I think it would feel somewhat laborious. But no disguise, there's always a lot to get through, so it's not always fun. But it's about a topic that I love, and so it's easier. It's easier to get through the homework when you really do love it. At times when the season's really busy and I'm switching and changing between multiple sports, that's when it gets really hard. but you got to do it. And look, you and I have spent enough time in our life on airplanes. Instead of watching movies, I use that to watch tape or do homework there, as well as here in my home office. And preparation. I think I have a healthy fear, Johnny, of going on the air and not being prepared, and that scares. That
you ever have that dream?
Me, so.
You ever dream?
Oh yeah, I have a dream. I have a dream that I miss broadcasts
all the time.
All the time.
So Leigh,
it's not good.
Yeah, it's just a terrible feeling. So I think when we put that into reality, but Leigh, I told you a story a while ago, and I'll share it with everybody now because it was interesting that you had a very similar situation. I remember this very clearly. I knew my father was in trouble, that he was most likely at the end of his life. But we still had a broadcast to do in California at the old Fontana Speedway. And I was in the elevator, and so my phone didn't work as I was going up, and it was buzzing. I was trying to get this phone call, and it was from my sister. And I just had a feeling right away, here I am in this elevator in California, and, there was a time difference from the East Coast, and I was walking out to do, at the time it was called Sprint Cup, but Cup Series qualifying at the racetrack. And as normal, I was, it was only about a half hour away from the showtime. And so I got out of the elevator and I got the phone to work again. And yes, my father had passed away, but there's just not people standing around to jump in and take over the broadcast. So I had to do this, 2-hour broadcast, put it aside for a second, compartmentalize it, and get on there and try to act like a pro, or at least as much as I could, and get through that. But if I recall right, Diff, you had a very similar story, didn't you?
I did. Yeah, I used to. There was a period of about 5 years where I called golf, predominantly back in Australia. Even though I was living here in the States, I would go home. This is back in the Speed Channel days. I'd go back home to Australia for the summer to spend time with family and friends. And while I was down there, the network that I started with, Network 10, said, "Hey, we'd love you to try some golf." And so I'd quite often call the Aussie Summer of Golf. Sometimes did some tournaments in Southeast Asia, and I was calling the Australian Open with Greg Norman, and it was just a highlight of my life to be alongside an Aussie icon like that. And I had seen my dad before I left from Brisbane to Sydney, and we knew that my dad was terminally ill, but he was still up and about. He was still driving his car, but really went downhill very rapidly. And I said, "Dad, I've got to go and do a couple of golf tournaments. I'll see you in a couple of weeks." And he jokingly quipped, "I'm not sure what kind of shape I'll be in a couple of weeks." And sure enough, his dry sense of humor was correct. He didn't last those 2 weeks. And I was on the air with Greg Norman, came off the air. It was back in the day when we weren't allowed to have our cell phones near the broadcast, and there was lots of messages and texts and stuff. And my dad had gone into like a medically induced coma, and later that night he died. But that was on the Saturday, of a 4-day, golf weekend of the golf tournament. I'd done 3 days of the Aussie Open, and I'm working alongside Greg Norman. And I said to my mum, Dad's not going to know that if I come home back to Brisbane or not. And I said, I'm going to do what he taught us as kids to do, and that is finish the job. And so I went on air the next day for 6 hours, and nobody knew that my dad had passed. And I just did that as a sign of strength to him, just to say, I'm going to carry through what you taught us, to finish the job. And I wrote, we're about halfway through the broadcast, and I wrote Greg Norman a little note, and he was sitting right beside me, and there were 2 other commentators, two more of my golf mates were there. And I said, "Greg, you're not to know this, nor does anyone, but my dad passed away last night, and it's the motivation of working alongside you that's getting me through." And he his head whipped around, and he had the most kind of shocked look on his face, and he just put his arm around me and patted me on the back and didn't say anything because we were on the air, and we just powered on, So it was it's a bizarre moment in this industry that we work in, Johnny. Like, it forces you to do things that they don't teach you in school. You just use your best judgment and go on. But I think that's a sign of strength to our parents, that they raised us well. Your dad did that with you, and mine for me. That you can compartmentalize, and you can be mentally strong, and you can power on, for want of a better saying, because it's not easy. What you went through wasn't easy, nor was it for me. And you and I have been around enough people, had enough friends and colleagues that have had adversity while we're on the road, and you have to rely on your on the road family. And that's why when people from outside the industry, they always say, "Oh, you guys seem to laugh and have a great time." It's like, yeah, because we're brothers and sisters on the road.
Yeah, it's funny. We had a boss at Speed Channel who probably for this discussion should go nameless. And we were having a discussion. It was one of the very few times when things weren't going very well. And one of our colleagues said, "Hey, we're going down a bad road right here because this isn't fun anymore." And said president of Speed Channel at the time said, "This isn't supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be a job." And so, Diffey, I interjected at that time and I said, wait a minute. What she's saying is not that we deserve fun jobs, is that our viewers are our customers. We're selling them a product. And if we don't have that camaraderie, like so many of us did, they're going to feel it, because it's like you said a minute ago, Leigh, and you hit it right on the head, that we study for this exam and the exam is taken in front of the public. If you're not having fun, I think fans, especially race fans, will expose you pretty quickly.
Yeah. And look, it doesn't matter what network, what period of time, we've all been told a similar message, is that you want to make it feel like the person sitting at home is having a coffee with you, or it's a group of guys, they're having a beer with you, or whomever it is, or whatever the scenario is. You want to be inclusive and you want to make the viewer feel welcome. And if you're having fun, they can have a laugh along with you. Like I consume plenty of television. I love watching golf. I've been watching the NBA final series, and I've been watching, I love sport, and I love listening to other commentary teams. And if they're having a laugh, then that makes me feel better. And so I like to try and do that in every team that I work on, because, we all make mistakes. That shows we're human. And if you can have a laugh, that shows we're human as well, right? It's just legitimate, honest, raw human emotion. Of course, we have to control it a little bit more because we're in a public domain and we're on television, live television. But, I don't ever think there's anything wrong with showing who you are and the occasional, laugh or emotion, sadness. We've had to deal with tough issues with accidents and injuries and sometimes deaths. And it's not always easy or nice, but if you can show the viewer that you are actually a real person, then I think that goes a long way, or it goes an extra step.
And we are, Diffy, we promise. I promise. I can vouch for you. We're real people, real people out here. Diff, I had the honor in 2012 to fill in for the awesome Chris Myers, and once for the Daytona 500 in 2012. And after that, I thought to myself, I said, man, I think now, and of course there's always things you want to do, but I was pretty adamant at that point that I had pretty much gotten to do then at that point about anything I had wanted to do in terms of broadcasting. I had filled out the so-called bucket list. Is there anything left for you if you could do something, you go out there and do something that you haven't done yet so far? Is there anything still on your list left?
Sure. The Daytona 500.
Yes. Hey, maybe we could work that out.
I don't know how. It's a little bit awkward dicey with it being on Fox. But who knows? Never say never. Maybe one day I'll get a chance to do it. But pretty much, there are some endurance sports car races like the Spa 24-hour and the Nürburgring 24-hour that I haven't done, and I don't ever think that I'll get a chance to do those. But I really have done every other major motorsports race in the world, and Monaco Grand Prix, Le Mans, Indy 500, Bathurst 1000, Rolex 24 at Daytona, Sebring 12-hour, goes on and on and on. And so MotoGP, Supercross, Motocross, two wheels and four. So I've been so lucky. I mean, Johnny, this dream just keeps going. I never even imagined that it would go this far. So I'm still living the dream, but if I can be greedy in that dream, before I turn the mic off I'd like to call at least one Daytona 500. That'd be pretty cool.
So what do you think the way things are divided up these days? I know if you could, I think a lot of broadcasters and a lot of broadcast networks would like to have more races than they do right now. But in order to fill out this package in the longest season in professional sports, I think sometimes it might be a little refreshing for the fan to see some different faces, and that the way it's divided up right now gives them that opportunity. There's some consistency, but then some differing faces along the way. What do you think about the way it's divided up right now in terms of giving the fans what they're after? And again, it's a demanding fan that's on the other side of the NASCAR TV.
Yeah, look, I think that probably the easiest way is that it would be on one channel for the whole year, and that's the easiest for the consumer, right? But that's not reality. And the way that it is now, I think, to your point, there's variety. Okay, some is on regular television, other is on streaming. It's chopped up kind of fairly evenly, right? But Fox has 12, we have 14. And then the other two partners in Prime and Turner have 5 each. So across the 4, it's an interesting split. I'm excited that we still have the most important part of the year, which is the playoffs and crowning a champion. And I don't think you and I don't determine how it's divvied up and how it's paid for. It is what it is. We can't change that. And I just think probably the point that you made is the most relevant. There's a bit of variety there, and the fans get to see how different broadcast partners and different broadcasters present the same sport, which is kind of intriguing in a way.
Do you guys get together, Leigh, but before the season starts? Are you going to be together for the first time when you get to the weekend and when you take over at Iowa?
Well, we did today actually. For many hours today. Earlier today, we had an all-in, and you know what they're like. Everybody who's involved is on like what we're doing now, and there's tape elements that are played. There are graphic things that are presented. There's and even all along, going back several months, we've had lead-ups to today. It's not like today was the first day when we're only 5 weeks away. Certainly not. We've met many, many times throughout the year, going all the way back to basically February. But that's what makes our team really so good. Our production team is really so good. Our producers and our directors and our management, and they want to make sure that everybody is prepared. Look, I think one thing that a lot of people don't know is that when you peel back the skin of the Prime coverage, they were the majority of NBC people. Our production team produced that for Prime. So, the majority of our production team is already in top gear. Now, they won't be involved on the Turner side of things, but when we get back going at Iowa, they're already at speed and ready to go. So we had a great meeting today. Everybody's super excited. And it's a smaller runway to the playoffs, because you remember when NBC had 20 races? Yeah. So there were 10 and 10. So 10 regular season and then the 10 playoffs. We have 4 now. So there are 4. The runway's a lot shorter before we get into playoffs mode. So I'm excited about that. For me, I get to do 2 more races than I did last year, because I did 12 last year. I get to do 14 this year. So I'm really looking forward to it, and having lived it and breathed it once, now knowing what that feeling and that pressure cooker of the playoffs is when you get through to the, from the round of 16 to the round of 12 to the round of 8, and then to the championship 4, having seen it, lived it, worked it. I'm even hungrier again for this year, because that was pretty cool. But there were lots of black holes for me last year. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know the cadence or the pace of what the playoffs are like. Now I do. So I'm even more excited for this year.
So I've known you for many years, Leigh, so I'd say there is no surprise to me, but I do have to say congratulations on a great first season and just being so well received by the fans and the community. I wouldn't trade the time we had together for anything in the world, whether it be on the air or off the air. I miss you, man. I can't wait to see you. I'm going to come find you at a racetrack sometime soon, but thank you so much for going lights out with us again. Again, you were the first guest on this show.
Good stuff. That time flies. But thanks, Johnny. It's always great chatting. I don't know where or when we'll cross paths, but it'll happen, mate.
Yes, sir. All right. Thanks, Leigh.